Police lights flashed across Lake Ranch that night, painting the dark water in red and blue as they flickered over the mist clinging to the wooden porch. I stood at the door, breath catching in the cold air, the scent of stale coffee still clinging to my hands. "There's a dangerous trespasser taking over my son's house!" Her shriek tore through the quiet lakeside air, coming from the woman standing behind the officers. Karen, my neighbor, a treasurer, owner of a gleaming white SUV, her face powdered to perfection so that the police lights glinted off her makeup like frost. She stood there, eyes cold, a Chanel bag dangling off her arm, red-painted nails tapping rhythmically on her phone screen as if she had done this before. But the trespasser she was calling about was me, the man who had worked 60-hour weeks in tech for 5 years, skipping vacations eating ramen, saving every dollar to buy Lake Ranch on Lake Michigan, a rustic wooden home where the floorboards creaked softly underfoot, the scent of pine still floating in the morning air. A dream I had believed no one could take away from me. Yet here I was, standing on my own porch, arms raised to show the police my paperwork while Karen smirked, a thin, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She glanced at her son, Tyler, who barely looked up from his phone, fingers tapping rapidly, mumbling about hitting a game milestone, completely oblivious to the drama his mother was orchestrating. I looked at them, then back at the warm glow of my kitchen light behind me. This was my home. I had paid for it with every sacrifice I made, every moment I chose to work instead of rest. And I was not going to let anyone, not even HOA Karen, take it from me. What I didn't know was that Karen's 9/11 call was only the beginning. And it all started because Karen believed I was living in the house she thought her son deserved to own. Lake Ranch was supposed to be a reward, a promise I made to myself after years grinding in tech, skipping vacations, missing out on dinners with friends, working late into the night to hit deadlines, saving every dollar while eating instant noodles. That rustic wooden house by Lake Michigan wasn't just a roof over my head. It was every sacrifice wrapped into one quiet sunrise. The gentle creak of wood under my feet, the scent of pine mixed with the cold morning air drifting in from the lake. It was everything I'd worked for, so that one day, I could open my eyes and see the water glinting in the sun outside my window, knowing it was mine. The day I moved into Lake Ranch, I thought life had finally decided to smile on me. 3 days later, Karen showed up. Her expensive white SUV pulled right up to my driveway, the door shutting with that heavy thump that screamed money and entitlement. Karen stepped out, hair carefully styled, a massive Chanel bag hanging off her arm, Gucci sunglasses shielding most of her face, but not the way her eyes scanned every inch of my house. She didn't knock. She walked around the yard, phone in hand, snapping pictures of the roof, the paint, the flowers I had just planted. She looked at my house like she was inspecting an investment, then turned to me at the window, flashing a sweet, practiced smile that made my skin crawl. "Oh, what a cute little house," she called out, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You must be the new owner, huh? How long have you been here?" I didn't even get a chance to answer before her eyes changed. The smile stayed, but her gaze went cold and sharp. She glanced at the roof, then at the paint, before speaking again. "The roof looks a bit dated, don't you think? And the paint, are you sure it's in line with HOA guidelines? We're very particular about property values around here, you know?" I stepped out onto the porch, trying to keep my composure while my mind screamed. I told her my name, Jordan, that I'd just moved in a week ago, that everything had been cleared with the HOA during the sale. Karen didn't care. She launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech, one she had probably delivered to plenty of others who had dared to buy a house in her kingdom. Her voice softened, sweet as honey, but her eyes gave away the calculation behind every word. "My son, Tyler, really needs a quiet place to nurture his artistic career. He's very talented, just needs the right environment to thrive. Have you ever thought about selling this place? I'd be willing to pay a very fair price." I stood there, stunned. I'd barely had time to finish unpacking, to hang up my pictures, to breathe, and here was Karen, asking me to give it all up so her son could have it. I told her no. Firmly. Karen paused, her smile faltering for just a moment, her eyes flashing with something darker. The smile was still there, but it twisted slightly. "But Tyler needs this. He deserves a place like this. You have no idea how important this is for his future." The way she said it, the way she looked at me, I realized she genuinely believed it. That her son's needs somehow outweighed everything I had done to earn this home. And just as the tension was tightening between us, Tyler appeared from around the back of the house. If Karen was dressed for a board meeting, Tyler looked like he'd just rolled out of bed in a Marvel T-shirt, eyes glued to his phone. "Mom, I'm in the middle of a match. Can we do this later? I haven't even claimed my daily rewards yet." Karen forced a smile, turning back to me, trying to salvage the image of her talented artist's son. "Tyler, honey, tell him about your art." "Yeah, sure, whatever, Mom," Tyler mumbled, not even looking up, thumbs tapping away. In that moment, I saw it. The disconnect between Karen's grand vision and the reality standing in front of me. As Karen finally turned to leave, she left me with words that chilled the air between us. "Jordan, living here comes with certain expectations. I really hope you'll fit in. It would be very unfortunate if complications arose with your residency." I stood on the porch, watching her SUV pull away, Tyler in the passenger seat, eyes still glued to his phone. I didn't know it yet, but that thinly veiled threat was only the beginning of the nightmare Karen was about to unleash. That morning, I still believed I could brush it all off. That Karen's vague threat was nothing but empty words carried away by the lakeside breeze. I was wrong. 3 days after our first encounter, I got my first letter from the OA. Thick cardstock envelope, the HOA's seal stamped neatly on the front, black ink official font. At the bottom, the signature Karen, with her title underneath, HOA Treasurer. "Welcome, new resident. Please be advised your front lawn grass height exceeds the community maximum by 0.1 inches. You have 72 hours to correct this violation." I stood in the midday sun, a ruler in hand measuring blades of grass, my pulse pounding with a mix of anger and disbelief. 0.1 inches. Who in their right mind measures grass that precisely? The answer was simple, Karen. 3 days later, the second letter arrived. This time a parking violation. "Your vehicle is parked 3 inches beyond the optimal curb alignment." I checked my security camera, and there she was, Karen, across the street, measuring with a ruler, snapping photos as evidence. Every morning I stepped outside, feeling her eyes on me from her window across the street. Cold, judgmental, recording everything, waiting to turn the most ordinary acts into a new violation. That evening, as I was about to put a pan on the stove to cook dinner, Karen came knocking. The banging on the door was relentless. I opened it, the scent of dinner still on my hands, and Karen held out another paper. "Noise violation at 7:00 p.m. This community values peace." I let out a humorless laugh, unable to find words. I was cooking dinner. How could that be a noise violation? Karen didn't care. There was a strange satisfaction in her eyes as she watched me simmer in frustration. For her, this wasn't about maintaining order. It was a power game. Then Karen arrived in full inspector. Cosplay, a bright yellow hard hat, a reflective safety vest, clipboard in hand, pulling up in her white SUV. She stepped out and began walking around my property, measuring the fence, the bricks, the lawn edges, mumbling numbers under her breath as she documented every inch. 10 steps behind her, Tyler trailed, his eyes glued to his phone, thumbs tapping away as he whispered about daily rewards in his game, oblivious to the theater his mother was staging around him. Neighbors began to avoid me. People who once greeted me in the mornings now averted their eyes when I passed. Invitations to weekend barbecues that had once been offered disappeared. When I went to the community pool, conversations would abruptly stop when I entered. Karen was succeeding in what she did best, sowing suspicion and turning me into the problem neighbor. I thought I was breaking. But one night, as I stood in the yard staring down at the stack of violation letters in my hand, a rough voice called out across the street, "Don't let her break you, son." It was Mr. Peterson, the elderly neighbor across the road, watering his garden, his eyes reflecting the weight of someone who had seen too much to be easily surprised. He spoke with calm certainty, every word steady. "Karen isn't just picking on you. She's done this to others before. And she always has a reason." I looked up at him for the first time, realizing that I wasn't Karen's only victim. But I still didn't understand. Why was she so obsessed with me? Why this house? Why now? Peterson stepped closer, lowering his voice, eyes serious in the cool evening air. "You need to know this house didn't end up on the market by accident. This house didn't end up on the market by accident." Peterson's words froze me in place, the quiet of the lake evening pressing around us as the sun dipped below the tree line. He slowly set down his watering can, wiping his hands on his faded jeans, his voice low and even. "Karen isn't just a control freak. She has her reasons, and those reasons are tied directly to Lake Ranch." I looked at him, an uneasy tension twisting in my chest. Peterson took a breath, his eyes drifting toward my house, the windows glowing warmly against the dusk. "The house you're living in, 15 years ago, it belonged to Karen's family. I clenched the stack of violation letters in my hand, my heart picking up speed. Peterson explained how 15 years ago, Tyler's grandfather, Karen's father-in-law, once owned Lake Ranch. But after racking up massive gambling debts, he was forced to sell it to pay off what he owed. The sale had been legal, above board, but losing the lakeside house had left a stain on Karen's family pride. When she married her husband and moved back to the area, she joined the HOA, eventually climbing to treasurer, slowly gaining control over the neighborhood's rules and finances. Karen has spent the last 3 years obsessing over that house, Peterson said, his voice rough with the weight of seeing it unfold. She's convinced herself that getting Lake Ranch back is the only way to restore the family honor, and that her son, Tyler, is the rightful heir to that house. I stepped back, piecing together the chaos of the past few weeks, the violation letters over inches of grass, the threats, the constant surveillance, the 911 call branding me a trespasser in my own home. None of it was random. Karen never saw me as a new neighbor. In her mind, I was a thief occupying what was rightfully her family's. The next morning, I sat on my porch, looking out at the lake, the sunlight dancing on the water, trying to sort through the heavy storm of thoughts in my head. Then, another letter arrived in my mailbox. A notice from the city's planning department. Anonymous complaint regarding unauthorized structural modifications. An inspection will be conducted within 14 days. A chill ran down my spine. I had checked every permit before buying this house. Everything was legal. But Karen was escalating the game, using the law to break me down, forcing me to leave. I immediately called the real estate agent who had handled my purchase, confirming again that every renovation and addition to the house was permitted, documented, and approved. But I knew now this was no longer a normal dispute. Karen was willing to do anything to push me out of Lake Ranch, to reclaim the house she believed her son, Tyler, was entitled to. That night, Peterson knocked on my door, carrying a thick manila folder bound with a rubber band. "These are all the documents I've gathered over the past 2 years," he said, setting the folder on my kitchen counter, his voice quiet but resolute. Inside were photos of Karen's own HOA violations, suspicious community spending, and testimonies from families Karen had pushed out using the exact same tactics she was using on me now. Peterson looked at me, his weathered eyes clear and steady. "Son, she's run off 4 families before you. They left because they were tired, scared, and no one else stood up to her. But you're the first one who's stayed." I sat there, my hand resting on the folder, the sound of the lake breeze rustling the leaves outside. I realized this wasn't just about protecting a house anymore. This was about stopping a neighborhood tyrant hiding under the mask of a concerned neighbor from destroying lives one family at a time. And I knew then I was ready to fight back. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, flipping through the folder Peterson had given me. Every photo, every fine, every suspicious invoice was a breadcrumb tracing back to families who had been driven out of their homes by Karen's relentless harassment. She had done this before. And Lake Ranch, the home I had spent my youth, sweat, and years of missed vacations to purchase, was her next target. I realized that if I didn't fight back, it wouldn't end with me. Karen would continue family after family using community rules as her weapon to control everything and everyone in the neighborhood. The next morning, I stepped outside, looking down the peaceful street lined with autumn leaves drifting across the sidewalks. Across the road, I saw Karen standing on the curb, phone in hand, watching me with that familiar look, a small confident smirk playing at the corner of her lips. Karen had no idea I was ready. I began collecting evidence of my own. I took photos of Karen's violations of HO rules. Her fence painted the wrong color, her mailbox installed in the wrong location, her own lawn overgrown past the limits she had enforced on everyone else. I recorded conversations between Karen and neighbors where she hinted that violations would go away if they cooperated. Peterson connected me with families who had once been Karen's victims. They told me about HOA meetings where Karen used her syrupy, careful words to push through unreasonable rules, how she fabricated violations to pressure families to leave. I compiled a thick, detailed file packed with photos, statements, financial documents, and witness accounts, everything I needed to expose Karen. Just as I was ready, Karen made her next move. One morning, I found a new notice taped to my door. Notice: prohibition of residential security camera installations. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting, claiming that cameras disrupted the privacy and peace of the community. I saw right through her. She wanted to stop me from documenting her harassment. But what Karen didn't know was that I had already backed up every piece of footage, stored in multiple places, ready to go public. The day of the HOA meeting arrived. I walked into the small community center room, the folder heavy in my hands. Karen sat at the head of the table, looking confident, surrounded by HOA members, some of whom had looked at me with wary eyes, unaware of the truth they were about to hear. She opened the meeting with her practiced sugar, sweet voicey. "We need to protect the peace and property values of our community." I raised my hand, standing up, my voice calm but firm. "I have some evidence I'd like to share with everyone." Karen turned to me, her eyes widening, the smile on her face freezing into a stiff mask. I set the folder on the table and opened it. Presenting the evidence one piece at a time, HOA funds funneled into her husband's construction company. Photos of Karen violating the very rules she enforced on others, statements from families she had driven out. The room fell silent. Eyes began shifting from me to Karen, the realization sinking in. For the first time, I saw Karen lose control. Her voice rose in pitch, cracking as she tried to dismiss everything. This is all lies! I did everything for this community. But the bank's statements, the invoices, the photos, they spoke louder than her protests. Karen's hands shook. The confidence she had always worn like armor was crumbling, panic creeping into her eyes as she realized her plan to force me out had backfired. For the first time, the HOA saw the real Karen. And for the first time, I felt my voice finally mattered in this community. The meeting room was so quiet that I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Karen stood there, pale, gripping her folder with trembling hands, eyes darting around as the HOA board members scanned through the financial statements and witness testimonies I had laid out before them. One of the board members finally spoke up, voice raspy but firm. "Karen, can you explain these transactions? Why has the HOA paid tens of thousands of dollars to your husband's company with no transparent reporting?" Karen's mouth fell open, lips quivering before she forced out a strained smile. "All of those payments were for the community, for landscape improvements, pool maintenance. I did it all to protect the property values for everyone. But no one was buying it anymore. I displayed photos of Karen fining neighbors for rule violations while ignoring the same violations on her own property. I played audio recordings of her threatening neighbors, telling them they should leave if they didn't want trouble. Each piece of evidence landed like a hammer blow, shattering the mask Karen had worn for so long. Karen's voice rose in a shrill scream. "You don't understand. I did it all for Tyler. He needs that house. He deserves Lake Ranch, not some outsider like him." She jabbed a finger in my direction, eyes blazing with hatred. I stood there calmly, meeting her glare. I knew in that moment that everyone in that room finally saw the truth. Karen had weaponized the HOA to harass, manipulate, and force families out, all to satisfy her obsession with reclaiming the legacy she believed rightfully belonged to her son. Another HOA board member spoke. "Karen, you've abused your position to misuse community funds, violated your neighbor's privacy, and threatened them into leaving. This is not how an HOA board member should act." Karen stammered, No, you can't do this to me." But a vote was called, right there in that meeting. One by one, hands went up, 6 votes to remove Karen from the HOA board, 0 votes against. Karen stood frozen, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. Powerless as the authority she had used to dominate the entire neighborhood was stripped away. She turned and stormed out of the meeting room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, each step echoing with her fury. But she no longer had any power here. As the door closed behind her, I finally exhaled. Peterson stood, placing a hand on my shoulder, nodding, his eyes filled with quiet pride and relief. Karen had finally been dethroned. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over yet. Because people like Karen, they don't accept defeat easily. Karen walked out of that HOA meeting defeated, but her silence afterward didn't bring immediate peace. In the days that followed, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers, at the mailbox cluster, at the community pool, during weekend barbecues. Everyone talking about one thing: Karen had been dethroned. For the first time in months, I stepped outside without feeling her eyes watching me. No more absurd violation letters in my mailbox. I could finally take a deep breath, sit on my porch with my morning coffee, and watch the sun glitter across the lake without feeling hunted. But the calm didn't last long. One foggy morning, as I was watering the plants in the yard, an old sedan pulled up to the curb. The door opened and Karen stepped out, not wearing Chanel, no heels, her face hollow, hair disheveled, her eyes tired. She stood there for a long moment before speaking softly. "Jordan, I need to talk." I waited, letting her continue. Tyler, he didn't need this house. He never did. I was wrong. Her voice trembled, her eyes red as she stared down at her clenched hands. She admitted that everything she had done came from her obsession with Lake Ranch, from the shame of her family losing the house to debt, believing that reclaiming it would fix the past. But I've lost everything. I lost my husband, my son, the respect of everyone. I have nothing left. Karen turned away, her shoulders shaking, and quietly got back into her car, driving off down the empty street, disappearing into the morning fog. Months passed, and Lake Ranch truly became the home I had dreamed of. The HOA restructured, removing Karen's ridiculous rules. Neighbors slowly warmed up again, inviting me to barbecues, asking me to join them for evening paddles on the lake. Peterson visited often, sitting on the porch with me, sipping coffee as we watched the golden light ripple across the water. Tyler, Karen's son, started visiting too. He had taken a part-time job at an electronics store, learning how to cook for himself, do his laundry, and for the first time I saw him smile, really smile, when he talked about his work and the customers he had helped. The Wi-Fi at my new place is way better, he once joked, his eyes lighter than I had ever seen. One evening I sat on the porch, watching the last light dance across the lake as a gentle breeze carried the scent of water and grass. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, finally feeling the peace I had fought so hard to reclaim. Lake Ranch was no longer just a house. It was proof that you can stand your ground for what is yours, no matter who tries to take it, no matter how powerful they seem, no matter how impossible it feels. I had kept my home, but more importantly, I had kept my courage. The battle with Karen didn't just teach me how to protect this house. It taught me how to protect myself. I used to believe that peace was something you naturally earned when you worked hard, followed the rules, and treated people with kindness. But the truth is, there will always be people ready to disturb that peace, under reasons they create themselves, to control, to manipulate, to fill the emptiness inside them with temporary power. And when that happens, you have to stand up. Lake Ranch is no longer just a dream to protect. It's proof that I stood up, that I faced the threats, the sleepless nights, the suspicious looks from neighbors, and said, "This is my home. This is my life. And I will not walk away." If you've ever felt backed into a corner, if you've ever felt small in a world that seemed too loud and chaotic, I want you to know you are not small. Your voice matters. The peace you deserve is something you have every right to protect. Thank you for joining me for this story. If you want to hear more stories about courage, justice, and the quiet power of people standing up for what's right, hit like, subscribe, and share in the comments a time when you fought to keep what mattered most to you. Because, you know what? Sometimes, strength begins simply by refusing to walk away from what you know is worth staying for. Before you go, if this story connected with you, let's keep this conversation going. Comment below, have you ever dealt with a Karen or an HOA nightmare? Or a moment when you had to stand your ground for what was yours? I read every comment, and your stories inspire me and others here. Hit that like button if you believe no one should have to fight alone to protect their home and peace. Subscribe if you want more real stories about courage, justice, and everyday people standing up for what's right. We share stories that remind you that your voice matters, no matter how big the world feels. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being someone who believes in standing up for yourself and your peace. Until next time, take care, and remember, sometimes, the quietest voices hold the most power when they refuse to give up.